Hello YouTube. This video is about the missing brake pedal in our gasser. We have a gas pedal, we have steering, but we have no brakes and no master cylinder. So that's what this video is about. Before we remove the seat, the steering column, and the gas pedal, I had my wife sit in the seat, who's going to be the future driver of this gasser, and find a comfortable position for the brake pedal and located it on the firewall such that we have full travel in the pedal, and we drew circles where the holes for the bolts go, and we're going to center punch one of the holes and drill it as a locating hole, and then we'll go on the outside and put this on the firewall and drill holes. So we'll center punch one of them and drill a hole. A 3/8 inch bolt doesn't quite fit in the holes in the bracket for mounting, but that's the size bolt I want to use, so we're going to drill the holes out to 3/8 of an inch. Because 3/8 inch bolts are the size that I want to use to mount the bracket to the firewall, we have to drill a 3/8 inch hole through the locating hole that we drilled from the inside. We'll mount our bracket on the outside of the firewall and bolt it up on the inside. And snug it up so that we can put a level on our bracket and level it out and mark the location of the other three holes. Now we also have to mark the holes for the master cylinder, so we'll do that at the same time. And we can remove the bracket, center punch our other holes, and drill them. We can now drill pilot holes for our 3/8 inch bit. We can enlarge our pilot holes to 3/8 of an inch. These holes are for mounting the master cylinder to the bracket, and they're 7/16, so we have to enlarge the holes to 7/16. We'll hang the bracket off of one of the bolts and go on the outside and bolt it up. We'll put a washer, a lock washer, and a nut on that bolt and tighten it up. Go inside and put the rest of the bolts in. Put the same combination of flat washer, lock washer, and nut on the remaining three bolts, and tighten all four of them up. And we have our brake pedal and bracket installed. I forgot all about the center hole for the master cylinder, so I've taken the bracket back out from the inside, bolted it to the outside, and now I'll draw the circle for the master cylinder and take the bracket back off. Locate the center of the hole as best I can, and the way I'll do that is I'll draw a vertical line and a horizontal line, and that should be pretty close to the center of the hole. That's the size hole that's in the bracket, but it's not the size hole required for the master cylinder. The hole required for the bore on the master cylinder is 1.465 inches, which is just under 1.5 inches. So we'll drill 1.5 inch hole. We'll center punch the hole. Drill a pilot hole. Take a hole saw, which are notorious for drilling bad holes. And drill it. Take a file and clean up the edges. Check and see if our master cylinder will go through the hole, and it does. Now all it's got to do is line up. Mount our bracket back again. I've put 2 1.5 inch long 7/16 inch bolts through the holes from the inside, and we'll carefully slide the master cylinder on. Hopefully we don't push the bolts through the firewall. Take a flat washer, a lock washer, and a nut, and put it on the end of the bolt. Tighten them up as much as I can. Take an 11/16 inch wrench and tighten them up. And I guess they're going to turn. Put a vice grip on the bolt head to keep it from turning, and tighten one nut at a time. With the master cylinder mounted and the brake pedal assembly mounted, the next thing we have to do is connect the two together. And we do that with the push rod that goes into the master cylinder. And we can see that if we put the clevis on the end of the push rod, that it's too long. So what we have to do is cut it down. With the push rod in the master cylinder and the clevis on the brake pedal, we can see that we need to at least cut this much off. Now they want a 1/16 inch of clearance between the end of the push rod and the master cylinder. So we'll make several attempts at this. I'd rather cut it too long and have to cut it a second time than cut it too short. Here we go. Let's see how we lay it out. We'll put the clevis on the end of the push rod and screw it in. Put it into the master cylinder. And that lines up pretty good. What we're going to have to do is screw it out a little bit. And at that point, it's going to have some preload on the master. We've got to screw it back in a little bit. And we'll put our pin in. And that seems to work good. The push rod didn't come with a jam nut on it, so I'm going to put one on. And we'll screw the clevis back in and make that adjustment again. And what we want is a 1/16 of an inch. And that's more than a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, that's up solid, so we'll take it back a half a turn and set our jam nut. That's too much play. That's perfect, I think. And we'll tighten it on our jam nut. I'd say that's good. We'll put our cotter pin in. And bend it over. And our brake pedal master cylinder is installed. Now the next thing we got to do is connect our output ports to our proportioning valve. But first I have to move the proportioning valve because I can't unscrew the adjuster nut because it's too close to the firewall. If you'd like to see the installation of these brake lines and proportioning valve, I'll put the link up in the upper corner of the video. Now that we have the proportioning valve moved forward so that we have full adjustment on the restrictor valve for the rear brakes, we can do the final step, which is to connect the input ports of the proportioning valve to the output ports on the master cylinder. Now on some master cylinders, the front port is for the rear brakes and the rear port is for the front brakes. But on this style master cylinder, which is a Corvette style master cylinder, the front port is for the front brakes and the rear port is for the rear brakes. Because the rear brakes are all the way in the rear here, we'll run the rear brake line first. First thing you do is ream out the end of the line so that you have a full opening. You don't have any metal pushed in from the cutter. Then you take the line and you put it in the flaring bar and tighten down the wing nuts slightly. Take the die and put it next to the line, and you want the tube to extend to the first level on the die. And then you tighten the line down. Put a drop of oil on the die and a drop of oil in the end of the line. Put the die into the tube, take the yoke and put it onto the flaring bar and tighten it down. Take the yoke back off, take the die out, put the yoke back on the line, and tighten it down again. And what you end up with is a double flare that looks like this. We'll run the rear line first, so it goes in like that. What we want to do is bend it towards the body and then have it come up along the body. So the first bend we want to have is right about here, and that'll bend towards the body. We'll take the line and put it in our bending tool with the mark at the beginning of the bend and bend our line. We don't need much of a bend, we just wanted to get it towards the firewall and check what we've got. Now we need to put a second bend in to bring it up along the firewall. And we'll make it almost parallel. and check that. Those first two bends are pretty much where we want them. It brings it up nice and close to the firewall. We need just a little bit more bend in here so that the line will be up against the firewall. While we're correcting the bend at the end of the line at the proportioning valve, we'll also take the line and put a 360-degree bend around the can. And this bend is meant to absorb any movement between the body and the frame. And it'll help direct the line to the master cylinder. With our line bent to this point and it's conforming nicely to the body, we want to put our final bend to the master cylinder right there. It's going to start right about there. With our final bend in place, we have a perfect fit. It screws right in. And we can tighten it down. And we have the rear brakes from the master cylinder to the proportioning valve to the rear brakes complete. Now all we have to do is do it for the front brakes. With the front brake line installed to the master cylinder, I think we've accomplished what we set out to do. We have the master cylinder installed. We have the master cylinder plumbed to the brake system on the vehicle. And we have the brake pedal installed. I haven't shown you bleeding the master or bleeding the brakes because there's hundreds of videos out there on YouTube for that. So if you enjoyed this video, there'll be more.